talking about Christine's book, Heartbroken Open. You can get a copy online or wherever fine books are sold. It's an amazing read. I devoured the book in one evening and remember halfway through the book, I barely knew you then, Kris. Our relationship was fairly new, and I remembered it inspired this feeling inside of me that was pretty interesting, which was, God, I wished I had been there to comfort you. And I think that a lot of people relate to that, and I'd like to talk about that. I know we all want to talk about this hour. On both sides of grief, there are all kinds of things that we get confused by, we're not sure about, we're not sure what's needed, the person grieving isn't sure what's needed, we don't know what's needed.
It's a very messy, confusing time. Nobody really knows what to do or how to respond or how to support. And
Tuesday I want a hamburger and everybody out. Thursday I need everybody around hugging me. And Friday, I want both. I mean, it's really that complicated. Before the break, for those of you just joining us on Heart Talk Radio, we were talking about the different kinds of loss that we experience: death, empty nest, illness, people being prisoners of war. Wherever you find yourself in the equation, know this, that Kris has really taken on the advocacy for people who are trying to find a different way to be in relationship with grief, a unique experience for each one of us. There is no exact way to grieve.
Well, and where loss may be different losses, grief is the same response to loss. It's just a response, an emotional response to change and transition that you haven't accepted yet. Allow your body to just move, and shake. And, there's all sorts of forms of grief that your body will actually really teach you how to grieve. If you listen, my stomach used to get tied up in knots, and I would know that I was holding grief, and I would just cry. I would cry just rivers and rivers of tears, and lo and behold, my stomach would feel better. And the other thing is that, grief and loss comes in waves, and it's, it's not constant. The thing is, you might be in grief, deep grief, for a day or two or an hour or two, and then you might be out for a while. And that process, the idea that this too shall pass, as long as you stay present in the moment, it really does pass, and it brings something else. And it's quite a, it can be a very magical time if you embrace it. If we think adults are uncomfortable with grief, then kids really don't understand grief. And my kids would be like, their friends would ask them what was wrong, and they wanted to just scream, "What do you mean, what's wrong?" It's like, how could you ask me that question, what's wrong? And I actually had the same experience with a couple of my friends. One of my friends, so sweet, just the sweetest woman, but she looked at me. I started to cry at lunch one day, and this was just like 3 months later, and she's like, "Did I say something to upset you?" And I'm like, "No, Richard died."
Everything upsets me.
Isn't that enough?
Exactly.
And it's just that need for people, because they don't feel comfortable. It is uncomfortable.
Right. Well, one of the things that you did, let's move on a little bit, ladies. This is our last segment. Thanks, everybody, for being with us this hour on Heart Talk Radio. We're talking with Kris Carlson about her book, Heartbroken Open. Kris, you did several things, and you talk about them in your book, but one of which was you had a journal, and one of the takeaways today that we want to offer you as part of your practice is, what do you do with all this feeling? Aside from feel it, there are tools, there are things we can each do that are unique to ourselves, right? You can certainly experiment, but one of the things you did, Kris, was you kept a journal the whole time. Talk a little bit about that.
I filled up my early morning hours, which was Richard's and my time to talk, and I would write, and I would just let my thoughts and my memories, and what I realized later was just this natural wisdom that when you're broken and your ego's at an all-time low, you just drop into this amazing wisdom. I would just journal, and that's where Heartbroken Open came out of, was really that journal. But I think the biggest thing is just to really ask for support. On my website, I've launched a women's support group, and it'll be a free support group. So I'm hoping that people, any kind of people who are supporting somebody through loss, or people who are in loss, go to the site and join the Ning site and there'll be videos of meetings that we're doing and that will encourage women to converse about this topic and be able to support each other. But ask for support. That's the most important thing.
Feel your feelings all the way out loud, to feel them through to the end. And when that process gets interrupted, the feelings don't go anywhere. There's a cycle that we may not be aware of, the end date, right? But there is a cycle that's natural to you that you may not know until that day comes. But one thing I have noticed, and I think ladies you notice this as well, our culture wants to put on an end date, like on a milk carton, right?
An expiration date.
An expiration date for grief. I remember when I was 14 or 15 years old, and it was 7 a.m. in the morning, and I got a phone call from a girlfriend telling me my best friend and 4 other friends had died on impact. One of my best friend was decapitated in a car. I was about getting ready for school. I would have been in the car had I not been grounded that weekend. And I'm telling you this story because the next thing I know, my father comes charging into my bedroom and he says, "Look it, girl, if you think you're going to use this as an excuse to wear a short skirt, put on makeup, and get out of being grounded, you've got another thing coming." And I remember being, talk about an interruptus magnimus. I mean, because my father was so uncomfortable with his own feelings. So many of us, I understand that today, but so many of us in our culture, we are embarrassed by our feelings.